Okay, hi everyone. It's really nice to be talking to you again with another amazing interview for the Meet the Creator series, this one being for April 2024. Today, I've got the very lucky experience of being able to interview Claire Furniss about her fantastic novel, The Things We Leave Behind. So welcome, Claire. It's really lovely to see you here.
Thank you. Lovely to see you too.
Are you happy to give us a little bit of a reading first, just so that we can get
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've chosen a bit that isn't quite at the beginning of the book, but hopefully sets the scene a little bit for what the book is about. And in terms of just the, should I give context? Sorry.
I wouldn't worry at this point.
Okay. Let's go. So, Clem, let's start at the beginning. How long is it since you left London? The woman has a kind face, but behind it she's professional, watching me closely as we talk in a cramped office on the second floor, with big windows looking out over an enclosed courtyard. Outside, some of the younger kids are being led out to play. I can't see Billy, but she's probably at the back, still putting on her coat and chatting as always. Have they given her a scarf to wear? Gloves? The wind is bitter today. A memory comes from nowhere of Billy's gloves with the animals on the fingers. They never got packed. Are they still at home, stuffed into the pockets of her school duffel coat, along with a couple of conkers, a pebble, sweet wrappers? Is the coat still hanging on a hook in the hall, in the silence and shadows, dust collecting unseen in its folds? Some nights when I can't sleep, I imagine walking round our house, filled with all the lost everyday things that got left behind, a museum of us. Through the red-painted front door, tripping over Billy's school shoes abandoned in the hallway, into the sitting room where I'm sprawled on a sofa, watching TV, to the kitchen where Dad's cooking pasta, a large glass of wine in hand. Claudia sitting at the breakfast bar with her laptop, telling him about work. The garden where Billy's on the swing, singing made-up nonsense songs about invisible elephants or magical hats. Sometimes I imagine the ghosts of us are still there, living our old lives. Other times I wonder if I'm the ghost, and the real me got left behind, and I dig my fingers into the skin of my arms to check there's still blood inside me, to make sure I can feel it. I drag my focus back to the woman talking to me. I don't remember exactly who she is, though I think she must have told me. Someone from the charity, or whether she's some kind of counsellor or just another person filling in more forms, I don't know. Did she tell me? It's all been a blur since we arrived here. No, that's not right. Things seem very clear as they happen, too clear somehow, too loud and bright, but they don't seem to sink in, so nothing joins together. Like those toys. Billy had one at home, a kind of spinning top with slits in the side and strips of pictures that you put in. What was it called? When you watched through the little windows, the pictures merged and seemed to be moving. Clowns juggling, acrobats tumbling. But when you slowed it down to a standstill, you could see that really each image was clear and complete on its own. It didn't join on to anything else. It didn't move or make sense. Clem? She's still looking at me, silent, waiting. Sorry? She must think I'm stupid. Nah, Misha says in my head, she just thinks you're insane. I mean, that must be why they sent you to see her, right? How long is it since you left your home? The woman says gently. I count backwards, trying to piece it all together. It seems impossible to measure everything that's happened in days, weeks, months, as if it's something that could be contained in the squares on the calendar. What's happened to us feels outside of time, too big for it. Time is different now. There is now and before, but they don't always go in the order they should. They muddle together, and I forget which one I'm in. Perhaps there will be an after, but I can't imagine it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now this is going to be, it's a horrible thing to ask an author, but really, your elevator pitch about the novel.
Yeah, so I have to say, I find this so difficult. I think authors are terrible about talking about their books. And also because this one has this kind of really complicated timeline. So you're kind of,
Yeah.
it's taking place in different periods of time. So, and it's also got a whole bit of plot that I can't talk about. But the basic premise of the book is that it's set in a world that it sort of is ours, but it also isn't ours. So it could be now that's just gone slightly different, or it could be in the very near future. But it's a world that's very recognizably our world, but something very bad has happened. And the bad thing is that there's this authoritarian government, and that for some people, life has become very dangerous. And the story is narrated by Clem. And as we've just sort of heard in the reading, the whole story is narrated by her. She's telling the story of how she and her little sister Billy travelled from their home. They had to flee their home because things got too dangerous for them. Bad things had happened to their family, and they had to flee first of all to family, and then things got too dangerous there, and they have ended up in Edinburgh. And Clem is telling the story of how they came to be there. But as the story goes on, we come to realise that Clem isn't necessarily the most reliable of narrators, and that there are stories, there are memories, there are kind of a mixture of the two, and there is something that Clem can't bring herself to tell that's happened to her, and that is kind of the kind of key to the book. Really, that's yeah. Did that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah, it makes lots of sense. So, I mean, the book feels like a dystopia,
Yeah.
but it's all too believable. So, was it inspired by events now, or where did the whole premise for the book come from for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It did come from sort of everything that was going on around us, really. As I was writing the book, for various reasons, it sort of was written over quite a long period of time. And I think there were so many different things that fed into it. I didn't want it to feel like it was kind of a prediction for something that's going to happen. I wanted it to feel very close to reality. I wanted it to feel almost within touching distance, because I think there is something very powerful about that. But it was sort of, in terms of what I drew on for writing the book, it was sort of partly things that were happening here in terms of things like the hostile environment, and kind of that very kind of divided feeling that there was after all the kind of Brexit, all of that time. Everything felt so kind of highly charged. I think that I wanted to kind of explore that, really, because it wasn't something that I'd really felt before in my lifetime. It sort of, things felt very different. It almost felt as though things could tip over into something worse. And then everything else that was happening in the world, in terms of, as I was writing the book, there were well, and still even more now than ever, the kind of whole issue of small boats and people having to flee their homes and being in danger, fleeing wars, was then heightened, with Ukraine, and all of that really fed into the book.
Okay. And it does feel very real. It does feel very possible when you're reading it. It's almost like, well, a couple of steps away, we could be there.
Yeah, that was really what I wanted. And I think in some ways that feels quite scary, but I think also hopefully it kind of helps us to think, well, actually things aren't like that. And what is, what do we have to protect? That's what I feel. I don't want it to feel bleak. I want it to feel sort of, in a way, part of it is that even though things are very, obviously they're in this terrible situation in the book, and there are really awful things happening, but there are still hopefully positives in the book. There are people who help, there's kindness, there's love, there's family, there's all of those things. But also, I say, it sort of shines a light on the things that we have that are really precious, I hope.
Definitely, definitely. And it actually leads me on to what I was going to ask you next, because there is a really good strong theme throughout the story of the importance of family, both blood and found family.
Yeah.
And was that something that meant a lot to you, that you wanted to bring out?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's always a theme that comes out in my book, and I think it's in the books that I've written. And I think I think that's really what you've said about found family is really important as well, actually, because there's a whole kind of mix of relationships in the book, and I think it's all about the people who you really care for and the people who are there for you when you need them. And I think that's because that's such a powerful thing. It's probably the most important thing in everyone's lives, really, is those people. And again, against the backdrop of a kind of very bleak situation, I think that is the real kind of, hopefully that's something that's really positive, and that's what drives the story forward. Yeah.
Very much so, and it brings the hopeful element throughout the story. It's always
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
positive, hopeful thing, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. I also loved symbolism of the paper cranes. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot of the paper cranes really are exactly, they're like a physical symbol of that hope, really, and they're a symbol. I mean, because they are a symbol of hope and of wishes. You know, that is the kind of symbolism of them in the world, and it was like it seemed like the perfect way to encapsulate that, because in the story Billy is obsessed with birds, that's her thing, and her friend makes her a bird as a symbol of sort of their friendship and of hope and of wishes, and it's what she wishes on because Billy's mum, Clem's stepmom, is arrested and taken away, and obviously that's really hard for Billy, and her friend makes her this bird and says, make them, and if you make 1,000 you can make your wish will come true. And so they become this symbol of that, of wishing, but of hope, and they make them as they're this sort of thread that runs through the story as they're on their journey, just representing their path, and that kind of the fact that all the way that the thing that keeps them going is that hope.
Definitely. Now, this isn't a question. This is just a heads up for those of you that haven't actually read the book, that there is a huge plot twist, which we're not going to talk about, which I suspected but hoped wasn't true. And just to let you know, guys, it broke me. Okay. So, be ready. Be ready, because, yeah. Yeah, I'm tearing up now, even thinking about it. It is incredibly powerful. So,
Yeah.
are we allowed to ask what you're working on next, Claire?
Yeah, well, that is the big question. There are so many different things one thing I haven't said about this book really is that there are so many different sort of aspects to it, because there's sort of there is this thread of fairy tales that runs through it, which I really loved writing, because Clem's writing these fairy tales for Billy, and they're sort of short little bits of the story that kind of thread through. And I loved writing them. I really sort of enjoyed that, because I love kind of folk tales and fairy tales and myths. And so that was really, it was something that was that I really enjoyed doing. I also loved that kind of future, that kind of, not science fiction exactly, but that kind of future looking, that slightly dystopian. I found writing that really interesting, and I love reading books like that as well. So yeah, there are so many different things that came out of it that I thought, I'd love to kind of push that a bit further and move more in that direction. So I've got several different ideas that I'm working on at the moment, but I don't quite know which one's going to win out in the in the
How lovely. That's like a chocolate box of ideas to pick from.
Well, I have to say, it's partly because this book took me so long to write that actually I think I had all these different kind of things coming to me as I went, and I was kind of jotting everything down as I went. And so it is lovely actually to have that as a kind of, because sometimes you get to the end of a book and you feel so kind of wrung out by it that it's actually you feel like, it's going to take a while for the ideas to come. Whereas actually this time I feel like, I've got lots of different ideas, but then it's working out which direction to kind of push in. Yeah, but
Well,
I
I
guess
couldn't agree more. I mean, I absolutely loved the fairy tale element as well. Because,
that's great.
there was kind of this juxtaposition of the raw reality and then this fairy tale going through it as well. And I thought it was wonderful. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad you
Really
like
well.
that. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
You know what? These interviews, Claire, always absolutely fly. To the extent that I've got so much more I could ask you about it, but I'm afraid we do have to stop.
Oh,
Thank
I've
you
really
very much.
enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.